Okay, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, friends. Thank you for the time and giving to our group. In this opportunity, I and my friend want to share our material about community language learning. Okay, the definition of community language learning. The first that we have to know before we talk about the definition of community language learning is about what is language itself. According to Henry Sweet, language is the expression of idea by means of speech sounds combined into words. Learning a language does not mean learning the formal system of that language alone, but it also means learning the strategies to use it an effective system of communication. Okay, as we know that language is the ability of humans to communicate with other humans using signs such as words and movements. Okay, and then what is community language learning? Community language learning, or we can say that CLL, is a language teaching method that involves psychological aspects where students work together in developing the language skills they want to learn. This method was first developed by Charles Akuran and his associates called counseling learning theory. There are also those who say that this method is humanist approach. The teacher seems to act as a counselor and the students as client. Community language learning represents the use of counseling learning theory to teach foreign language. If the term counseling is tracked back, it refers to the idea that there is a relationship between a counselor and client. Uh, Related to community language learning, from the definition above, we know that this method is to teach that students must work together in develop their language that they want to learn. For example, in English class, students have to develop their language skills and study the language with classmates or in community. Not only wait for the teachers explain. Teacher here as a counselor who will mentor the learning process of the students, and between counselor and client have close relationship. And then about concept of community language learning. The concept of community has been used in this method because when such relationship mentioned above is applied specifically to groups with the task of learning a second language, a very special kind of community improvement results. Language learners and their language teacher build an intense atmosphere of warmth. This kind of security and support from one another in the group is really typical in this method and almost the exact opposite of the atmosphere in the schooling setting. The language learners never feel isolated and alone because everybody belongs to the group and everybody sits in a community and sense positive regard of everyone else. Community language learning represents an attempt to put the method emphasize on community learning as opposed to individual learning as some other traditional teaching does. According to Rickards and Rogers, the concept of counseling and its application in community language learning are compared. The language teaching tradition of community language learning represented the underlying concepts of the client-counselor relationship in psychological counseling. From the explained above, we know that from the word community, we can already know that the students here not individually in study the language. that they want to learn, but in groups or community. And as previously explained, students will more often express or give their opinions when in groups or communities. And students usually feel uncomfortable in new situation. But when the students have already feeling used to their situation, they will not be passive but be active in their group or community. So, related to community language learning, it means learning a language in the sense that students learn about language not alone but with groups or community. And then about principle community language learning. In general, the principle of community language learning, students are considered as whole peoples or a whole individual, meaning that teachers not only pay attention to students' feelings and intelligence, but also relationships with fellow students and students' desire to learn. According to Quran, students feel uncomfortable in new situations. By understanding feelings of fear and sensitivity, teachers can remove students' negative feelings into positive energy for learning. In addition, a student is sometimes afraid to look stupid or afraid to look like that they don't know more about something in front of the class, so that they tend to be passive in class activities. Therefore, a teacher must position themselves as a counselor who will understand their feelings and problems faced by the students. In this method, the teacher must pay attention to the relationship with students and the relationship between students. Or the teacher pays attention to the students as a whole, as a as a whole. As a counselor, the teacher must be able to understand the feeling and problem faced by students. And then about the purpose of community language learning. Learning is carried out based on students' difficulties. The purpose of self-study is to build communication relationships and eliminate fears in students as they learn a second language. Therefore, the community language learning method aims to enable students to learn how to use the target language or the language being studied communicatively.
Okay, and next we talk about the role of teacher and students in community language learning strategies. The community language learning method is more aimed at eliminating students' anxiety or fear when the learning a second language. Consequently, the approach places more emphasis on consequential guidance than conventional teaching. Therefore, the teacher is more positioned as a counselor who trains his students. Students are also seen the clients, so the relationship between the teacher and students is like a mentor and a client. Saying the importance of the relationship that is built between teacher and students. This community language learning method is neither student-centered not or teacher-centered, but rather teacher-student-centered, with both of them being the decisions makers in the classroom. It's mean that not only teacher can to be a speaker, but the students too. And next, the characteristics in learning process. In relationship to the psychological states of students, Shuran said there are 6 elements that need to be considered in the learning process. The first is security. Second is aggressions or actively involved. Next, attention. And next, reflection. Next, retention, and the last one is discrimination. There are 5 stages that students go through in using this approach. First, the embryonic or birth stage, in the stage where students are still using their first language to convey their hopes and desires. Students depends on the teachers in 100 or close to 100%. Second, the self-assumption stage, in the stage where students have received moral support from their peers or from their teachers, so the students being to dare to use their second language in class, even a simple form. Third, the separate existence stage, which is when students gradually begin to reduce their mother tongue or dare to express things in their second language, they assume that everyone in the class understand the expressions. Fourth, the resolve stage, when students get used to using a second language freely and there is a communication relationship with other students. In the learning process, students are not longer silent and are already actively talking. And five, the independent stage, which is the stage where students have mastered all the material to be discussed and students have been able to explain their language and can become mentors to guide the second language to other students. Okay, and the next one is the advantage and disadvantage of this method or in community language learning strategy. Okay, the first one is advantage. First, pay attention to the human sides of students because these aspects are dominant in language learners, and the need for groups of students to pay attention of this human aspect. Next, paying attention to students and their mother tongue and background and culture. It can help shape the positive side of students to understand the destination language as well as the insight of native speakers. Okay, and the next, this method is close colored by some of the methods we have studied so far. Pay attention to students' problems, their needs and their goals. What some experts believe is that it can help build language skills from an early stage. Okay, and the next, the close relationship between the supervising teachers and his students. This relationship requires native speakers, especially in the early stage of learning, until the teacher becomes the only main center for getting to know the groups, techniques for interacting with native speaker using the target language. Okay, and the next, paying attention to cooperative language. Fostering a social spirit in the classroom so as to increase the enthusiasm of students and motivate students to have good relation with the teachers and motivate students to be more creative. Okay, and the last one is the teacher assigns students it achieving an understanding of language rules with its individual talk, their speech and active. Not by dropping, the teacher also help the the use of vocabulary, expressions and the arrangement of the target language so that it's easy to understand. Okay, and last it's about disadvantage. The methods that's not real on the curriculum and manuals. This method relies on the wishes of the students as well as aspect of the destination language and culture which the students lack master of. And the next, this method does not pay attention to individual differences among students because it pays attention to the human side of speaking skills and negative academic aspect and writing skills. Okay, ma'am, we think that's all about our presentation. We are so sorry if we have bad presentation. Thank you and see you, ma'am.